Welcome to Handi Quilter Watch and Learn. Today we're going to show you how to do stitch in the ditch with curved piecing. For more great quilting content, be sure to subscribe and watch more of our videos. So I'm Kim Sandberg, and today I'm with
Christina Whitney.
We're both studio educators here at Handi Quilter, and we're really excited to show you this technique we're going to talk about today. So let's jump in, Christina.
Okay, so we are going to be working on a double wedding ring quilt today, and you'll see this one in the back behind Kim. We were working on that. I guess the machine's covering it, but you'll see it later.
We can scoot the machine over. There you go. Now everybody can see that.
Yeah, while I was working on that, I got everything stitched in, all of the pieces, and then I thought, yeah, I think I do want to do some stitch in the ditch. So I went back and did that, and I thought, you know, going through that process, let's share what I learned from that.
Yeah, because this is not stitch in the ditch on a normal seam that's straight and square and flat, right?
Exactly. So not only is it curved, but we also have to decide or remember if the seams are pressed open or if they're pressed closed. So anytime you're doing stitch in the ditch, if your seams are pressed open, you don't want to be stitching right down that middle because you're not going to be catching any fabric, and there's a possibility you're going to be hitting the threads that are connecting the pieces of fabric, causing it to open up. So if you are doing it with seams that are pressed open, you want to stitch just a little bit over onto one side or the other. Okay. So with that being said, how do you pick your thread? That's
what I was just going to say. So how do you determine what color thread you're going to use? And how do you choose which side to stitch on then if it's pressed flat? Because caveat, the quilt she's working on today is one that I made, and all the seams are pressed open because that's what I tend to do. So how are you going to choose on this one?
Well, I'm going to just decide and make sure that I stay consistent.
Okay.
So if we look down here at this piece right here, you've got this melon shape. This one I would probably stitch on the inside.
Okay.
Just a little bit, because that's kind of a closed shape. Whereas the outside, it's going to go all the way around and create a circle.
Gotcha.
So that one I will stitch
on the outside.
On the outside. So I might actually even stitch double.
On both sides?
On both sides.
Of the seam? Okay, cool.
If I decide to, I can decide not to. It's a personal preference.
Okay. And whatever you want to do is totally cool on this.
We can have fun.
Now, what kind of thread are you using on this particular project?
Well, generally for stitch in the ditch, I want to use a finer thread so it kind of melts in and you don't see it. Because, okay, I'm human. We all know that I'm human, and I tend to wobble, and I'm going to get some stitches on one side or the other, even if I'm doing it, you know, on one that's the seams are pressed to one side and I'm going right in the ditch. I kind of wobble a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I want to use a finer thread that's not going to show as much, one that's going to blend with my fabric. But if you have fabrics that change colors quite a bit, you don't want to be changing that thread all the time.
No.
So one of my favorites is a monopoly from Superior Threads.
Yeah, me too.
It's just a clearer thread that just brings out the color that you're stitching on.
Yeah, it's invisible. That's great, and that is what I started using on this. So good choice to continue with that thread. I love it.
Okay, so threads, something fine, something that's going to blend or be invisible. Picking which side of the seam you're going to stitch on, if it's an open press seam. If it's a closed press seam, you can stitch right down the ditch.
And the ditch is the side that the seam is pressed away from. It's the side where there isn't a seam underneath it. That's what we technically call the ditch, right?
Yep. And again, if you wobble, it's okay. I also will sometimes change my stitch length up higher.
Oh, really?
So it's a lot more tiny stitches.
Okay.
So again, I don't see that long length of thread as much.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah, that makes
if I
sense.
remember.
If you remember.
Yeah. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is decide how we're going to stitch these curves.
Okay.
Curves are really hard to control with your machine. Straight lines are a little bit easier, but with the curves, I like to have some assistance.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to some rulers.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, you want to go ahead and, actually, let's leave the machine there for a second. We're going to look down right here again.
Okay.
And I want to stitch this melon shape here.
Okay, so we're going to
So-
stitch inside.
Yeah, that's where we'll start. So I've got a whole bunch of different rulers here. I'm going to put a ruler up there, and I want to remember I need my 1/4 inch
Right.
from where I'm actually going to stitch to the edge of the ruler. So if I'm looking at this one, the shape's not matching as well as I would like.
Right.
I could try the other side, same thing. So I'm going to audition a lot of different rulers
Okay.
and see if I can find one that has an arc
That's pretty close.
that's fairly close. It's not going to be perfect.
Okay.
How about that one?
That one looks pretty good. I mean,
Okay.
that one's, yeah.
That's my winner. That's the one I picked to begin with.
Oh, good.
Okay.
And if you don't have a ruler that is exact, I'm guessing you're going to give us some tips on how to manage that.
Exactly.
But having that curve is really good, right? It's
Yes.
important.
Yep, having the curve. I mean, you can even do it with a straight line ruler
Okay.
using the technique that I'm going to show you.
Okay.
I like to get as close as I can to begin, but you know, you can wiggle it.
Fudge it just a little bit.
Yep.
Wiggle it a little bit. Too.
Yep, that's what we're going to be doing.
Okay.
Okay, ruler safety first of all.
Absolutely.
We've already got the ruler base on our
Yep.
machine.
We do.
We have the Surefoot on the machine.
Yep.
And the other thing that we always talk about is handy grip. So I'm not going to use handy grip.
No.
For this particular
And why?
thing, well, let me tell you. For this one, since that ruler isn't exact, I want to be able to move the ruler freely without it sticking to the fabric.
Adjust. So you're actually going to move the ruler maybe even a little bit while you're stitching.
Yes.
So ruler safety is super, super important here with that Surefoot then here so that
Exactly.
we don't run any chances of accidentally moving that ruler somewhere that it shouldn't go,
Yeah.
i.e.
And-
close to the needle.
Generally, when we're teaching ruler work, we tell you only one thing can be on at a time. Either the machine can be on or you can be moving the ruler.
Yeah.
You're not going to do both at the same time. If you are comfortable with your rulers, then you can move on to this, this next technique.
Okay.
So let's bring that machine over.
Let's bring the machine over. All right, I've got the machine here. Get it down. We've got some puffy batting here. This project is double batted because this is going to be for a fun St. Patrick's Day themed wall hanging that I'm doing. So lots
Okay.
of green.
So I'm just bringing up my bobbin thread. I'm going to do a little tie off here.
Okay.
Just
you're
using
just-
my walking stitch.
Walking stitch. And how do you do the walking stitch?
So your needle up down button, if you just hold that, the needle will cycle up and down at a slow rate.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got this shape here, and I want to get fairly close to that edge without, you know,
Stitching
into
right on that seam.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, we forgot to talk about our settings.
Oh yeah.
Okay, whenever I'm doing ruler work, I take my basting stitch off. And I always...
That's for those of you that have a pro stitcher. We had the basting stitch on because we were doing some basting earlier.
So right now I'm at 13 stitches per inch.
Okay.
I like to do my ruler work in cruise at a really slow speed.
Okay.
A lot of other people really like being in precision for ruler work. So try both, find what you're comfortable with. I also like to have my needle in the down position when I stop the machine.
Okay.
That's my placeholder. So if I need to make adjustments, the needle's there, I'm not going to lose my spot.
Gotcha.
It's kind of like reading a book and putting your bookmark in.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got our settings. I'm on cruise at 25, 13 stitches per inch, needle in the down position, and I'm going to go ahead and start stitching. You'll notice that the ruler is just a little bit away
Yeah.
from that seam.
Got to leave that 1/4 inch offset.
Oh, getting a little close to the seam there. Okay,
Close, but not on it.
Yep.
So that's perfect.
you'll notice on this other side over here, I'm further away. So as I'm stitching, I'm going to gradually move that ruler
Okay.
and push that ruler up.
That really is a very small movement you're doing.
Yeah.
There. That's why it's still safe to do that while you're stitching.
Correct.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah, no big movements, just a little bit. Like, I mean, right now I'm really going to overemphasize this. The distance between the seam and the ruler right now versus over here.
Oh yeah. That's where
Can
you
you-
can really see the
can you see
difference
that?
in that curve. Yeah.
But as I stitch along, I'm going to shift the ruler a little bit so that I can keep it where I need it to be. And again, I'm trying to stay a little bit off of that seam. Okay, I'm getting a really bad hand position here, so I'm going to pause with the machine down, adjust my hand positioning so I have control, and then I'm going to continue stitching as I shift the ruler just minusculely.
Good use of that word.
That should have been our secret word for the video. Okay, so I've got that stitched down in there. I'm going to do a quick little tie off. Pull that bobbin up.
Clip that thread.
Yep, clip that thread. There's some others over here. So now some people ask, well, why would you do stitch in the ditch?
Yeah.
So if you look at this, it's going to keep that shape defined.
Yeah, exactly. So that it's clear, and we can place a separate design in here.
Yep.
And it makes, remember, whatever you don't stitch is what puffs up and it's what you see. So it's like setting a boundary around something when you do stitch in the ditch. I also love stitch in the ditch because it emphasizes the piecing. And when you've done a project, for example, like this double wedding ring, that the piecing, it takes a little skill. And so maybe wanting to highlight that a little bit is nice.
Yeah, some people love stitch in the ditch, some people don't. So I'm going to move this over just a little bit for a minute. One other thing that we want to talk about with stitch in the ditch is, you know, whether to do it or not.
Right.
Or when to do it. Okay, so right now, this particular quilt, you'll notice that it's basted through this section here.
Yeah.
Whereas over here, this one already has a design stitched in it.
It does.
So you have options. You can go through, do all the stitch in the ditch first, and then come back and put your fills in, or you can stitch in the ditch in your throat space, put your designs in, move on to the next throat space, stitch in the ditch, and so on. If I'm changing threads, like I didn't do monopoly throughout all of my designs on the other quilt, so I wanted to do all the monopoly at once.
Right.
So I put all my designs in first, and then I looked at it and said, I want to define the shapes a little bit better. I want the stitch in the ditch. So I went back at that point and went through the entire thing and did the stitch in the ditch. So it's up to you. Stitch in the ditch helps to stabilize things before you put the motif in, or you can choose to do it at the end. So
That's great.
how do you normally do it?
I would say the same as you, and often I know that let's be honest, I don't do a ton of stitch in the ditch. I tend to. I just usually don't, but it does tend to be one of the things that I will actually go back and do after the fact. And seeing this quilt as I've started working on it and putting designs into the rings, I really do think I'm going to go back and do some stitch in the ditch, especially because I want to do some microfills in here too.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
So,
yeah, and with the stitch in the ditch, you do not have to stitch every single seam.
right.
So you could choose this center shape. Can't think of a word for that shape right now.
Yeah.
The middle of the double wedding ring.
Because these are the melons, and then this is the center. It's the.
We'll just call it the center. You
the
guys can
center.
all figure out what I'm talking about. Yeah, so this one was the one that really stood out to me on my quilt, that I had this beautiful design, but then I've got this extra fullness around the edges that was kind of popping up, and I didn't want that to be the focus.
Right.
So that's when I went back and I stitched those seams down to let the design show a little bit better.
So I've actually got a section on the quilt right here where exactly that's happening. Do you want to do, why don't you show us one more time how to do the stitch in the ditch right here?
Okay.
And you can do some of that right there. And then everyone can really see the difference that it makes to the design.
So this is a different curve, so I'm gonna, actually that inside one will be good.
Yeah,
okay.
It's really close. So
do you want it on the green side or the white side? Or both?
You know what? Just pick one and do it maybe on the green side, because I really think I'm going to go back and do some fills in here around this to define the leaves.
Okay.
So.
Okay, bringing up that bobbin thread again.
Okay.
Doing my tie off. And it's really important with this monopoly thread, it's a little slippery. You want to get a good tie off.
Yeah.
Okay, so this time, that ruler just looks lovely there, but again, it's not going to be long enough, so I'm definitely going to need to pause and adjust my hand placement during this one.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, I'm trying to stay on the green side. Getting a little close to that seam.
It's okay though.
Okay, I'm gonna adjust. Oops. There I go, I'm being human. Hit my side clamp.
Yeah, sorry, the backing I used on this quilt was a little bit of a scrap. There's not as much as there technically should be around the edges.
Okay, do you want me to do the bottom part or just that one?
Yeah, would you?
Okay. So
My real objective here is to see how much of my quilt I can get Christina to do for me. Let's be honest.
oh, and after doing that last quilt where I was in the ditch, this is a little trickier for me to try to remember to stay off the ditch. See, I always press to the side, so I generally will be stitching right in the ditch. Or at least close to it.
Oh, you're close enough. I'm not worried about it. I can see what a difference that makes, though, in really making that the fabric lay flat and define that motif more. It looks really good.
And you could even, with the seams being pressed open, sometimes I like to do a channel. I lost my scissors. There they are. And so if I get little wobbles, if my channel is a little bit bigger, sometimes it's more forgiving. So options are out there. So
that works. It looks really good. I can really see that difference there, how it just made that lay flat. Makes both of those motifs just pop a little bit more on the quilt. Okay, Christina, so you just mentioned doing the channel. That's a term that maybe some people don't know. Why don't you show us what that is right here on this next one?
Okay.
What we mean by a channel. I really like to use channels. I probably use channels more than stitch in the ditch when I quilt.
Okay, yeah, a channel is just, a section that is the same width or close to.
Getting that up there?
Yeah, I was holding my tail, but it was from an old thread, not the one that I was supposed to be holding.
Oops.
We're having fun.
Real world,
Okay.
Real world quilting here.
Yes, so I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam.
Okay.
Or not seam, channel.
Okay.
So you'll notice that my foot is lined up with the seam.
Okay.
That foot, from the edge of the foot to the needle, is a 1/4 inch.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is use my ruler right on the seam, and that's going to allow me to get that 1/4 inch channel. Okay, so we're going to stitch along. And remember, this isn't a fast speed process.
No.
I'm going to adjust a little bit here. I like to adjust the ruler a lot of times when I'm actually stitching so that oops, I went off for ice cream there.
That's okay.
How do we fix that? We go
Just
back
go
to
back.
where we were, do another tie off, and then continue on. See, I was talking and stitching at the same time.
I know. It's a special talent, right?
Yeah. Okay, so I like to move the ruler as I'm stitching so that it's a smoother transition.
Right, right.
So if I'm stitching an arc, I pause, I adjust the ruler. Coming out of that pause isn't going to be as smooth. So that's why I like to be able to do it all at the same time. Okay.
And so when you're stitching a channel, that's the one time that you do actually line up the edge of the ruler right to the seam if you want
Yes.
that 1/4 inch offset.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so you stitched up the side there, and you're going to do the channel on the top part here
Yep.
again.
And I'm going to line that ruler up right on the seam again.
Okay.
Adjusting my ruler. Okay, then just to make things the same, I'm going to stitch the side of this one, defining that end section. Okay, so now we've got that channel in there.
Oh, that looks so good, and it's a place that you can. Oh man, frog in my throat. It looks so good, and it creates. I like to think of it as kind of a frame for the design, and that offset it just makes the design pop. Looks
Yeah.
really good.
Do you want to do your wishbones in there?
You can stitch them if you want to. That's actually a Pro Stitcher design. I don't think I brought that USB in here. It's a design from Quiltable.
Okay.
So I was using some of their designs that were created for double wedding rings in this quilt. But yeah, you could absolutely free motion it if you want to.
It's a challenge. Okay, let's hope our tension's good
My
now.
evil plan is working. Christina's gonna quilt my whole quilt for me.
Okay, so here's my thought process with starting my wishbone.
Okay.
If I start going up this way, I've got this whole section left to fill.
Okay.
So I'm going to start going down, fill that first, and then I'm going to be more on track.
Gotcha.
Okay?
I like the way you're thinking.
So I'm about halfway, and I'm going to check my settings, do this all one-handed, and this is Kim's quilt, so if I mess it up, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's just a cute one I'm going to put out at St. Patrick's Day.
So go past and around, past and around.
Oh, that's perfect. That really creates a hard stop point for you to know exactly where to go to. Oh, that's
Wow,
perfect.
look at that. You can't tell which one is free motion and which one's computerized. Woohoo!
Which is which? That looks great, Christina. Thank you.
I'm tooting my own horn here.
I'll think of you every St. Patrick's Day when I have this hanging in my home.
Perfect. Okay, let's move that out of the way.
Well,
Anything else you want me to stitch on your quilt, or do you think that we've shared enough knowledge for the day?
I think we've covered it for today. Thanks for your help, though. I do appreciate that.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's lots of fun to see, you know, just the collaboration of what we can come up with for a fun quilt.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you got some great tips on how to do stitch in the ditch on a not straight seam, on those curved seams.
Yep.
Be sure to give us a subscribe and like for more great quilting content, and have fun quilting.